The player that's going to determine Atlanta's direction next offseason is Nacho Alvarez? Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Tuesday, January 28th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on Twitter, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Speaking of, fun newsletter that should drop by the time this episode comes out. The Braves on Monday announced their promotional giveaways for 2025. Wanted to have some fun with it, so we went to the newsletter and we ranked them. So go check that out. Again, bravestoday.com. Free or paid memberships, great way to support the show and what we're doing over here trying to cover your Atlanta Braves. But this shows a little bit of a different approach, right? We've talked about the money implications of resetting the CBT and how it feels like Atlanta would like to. They don't have to, right? We talked about that yesterday. The money's not actually that much to pay. They don't have to reset the CBT, but it feels like they don't mind getting to reset the CBT this winter. They've tried to make deals. Not all of them have worked out. They were in on Tanner Scott. They were in on Justin Verlander. They had a deal with Jeff Hoffman before it was nixed because of a physical. They've tried to spend money, and other than Jurickson Profar, weren't really able to get it done. And so we just kind of assumed that, okay, they're going to end up resetting the CBT. But what if they were trying to reset the CBT because they have a plan for 2026? Now, this is a little bit of a different show than what we normally do. This is a lot of speculation here, okay? But let me paint the scenario of what could be happening in Atlanta's front office right now. And to do that, I think we need to clarify something about resetting the CBT. We talked about this yesterday. We've talked about it in the past. Yes, the big reason to reset the CBT is what the base is. It goes back to the base penalty rate of 20%. The first year you exceed the CBT, it's a 20% tax on your overage. And then once you hit 20 million over, there's a surcharge added to that, right? The second year, it's a 30% tax. And then the third year, which 2025, if the Braves are in the CBT, it would be the third consecutive year, that tax becomes 50%. And again, Atlanta is not forced to reset the CBT. They can pay these taxes. In 2023, it was a $3.2 million tax, right? Their cash payroll was 204.5. But because of the nature of these extensions, how they get more expensive down the road in these extensions, right? In 2025, Sean Murphy's getting a pay raise, Spencer Strider's getting a pay raise, all of this stuff. Their CBT figure was 245, so they paid $3.2 million in tax. The total outlay by the Braves was $207.7 million. In 2024, the cash payroll ended at $231.9 million. The CBT payroll ended at $276.9. Like less, like just barely under that third threshold where your first draft pick would get moved back 10 spots. And so because they were a repeat payer, it was 30% instead of 20. And then they got the additional surcharge for being in the second tier, the 20 million to 40 million over. Their tax was $14 million. So $231.9 million in payroll, $14 million and like some change on the tax came out to a total cash expenditure of $246. Okay. And as we've discussed, the Braves are nowhere near the CBT right now as far as having to pay significant taxes. $212 is the cash payroll. Again, they finished last season at $231. The CBT is like $230 on a first level of the CBT of $241. So the Braves have room. They're good to go. And again, and if they do go over, it's 50% on just of the overage, right? If they go over $1 million, their tax bill is $500,000. But there's another aspect to going over the CBT that you could see an advantage if the Braves did not exceed the CBT in 2025, and that is the penalty for a qualifying offer player. And Atlanta can benefit on the qualifying offer both ways, okay? The first way is if Marcell Ozuna has an insane year and walks in free agency, they can give him a qualifying offer. If you pay into the CBT, the pick that you get if the player rejects a qualifying offer and signs somewhere else is after the 4th round. The Max Fried pick will be after the 4th round. If you did not pay into the CBT and you're not a revenue sharing recipient, that pick comes after competitive balance round B. So it's closer to the top of the draft. The bonus slot is higher, so your draft pool is bigger than if you were paying into the CBT. So that's one area. And that's a whole conversation we'll have to have about what is the amount of the qualifying offer. Do the Braves give one to Marcell Ozuna or not? Et cetera, et cetera. We'll have that whole conversation later. But the other side of this is the penalties are less severe for signing a qualifying offer player. Alex Anthopoulos has gone on the record as saying they don't, really love the idea of a draft pick being moved back 10 spots. And I do think that the dollars that they were moving around last year, that was intentional. Because again, they finished less than $100,000 away from that 277 third threshold. But signing a qualifying offer player is more palatable if you did not pay in the CBT the previous year. As it stood right now, this offseason, if Atlanta wanted to sign a CBT player, they would have to give up their 2nd and 5th highest picks, as well as $1 million from their IFA bonus pool. And the way that Atlanta has liked to work in international free agency is they like to be towards the top of the talent pool in international free agency. They want to get one of the top players in the class, right? Sometimes it's the number 1 or number 2. I think Jose Perdomo was towards the very top this year. Both an outfielder and a pitcher who were in the top, 10, 15. One of them was a late riser, whatever. The Braves like to be in the top of the group. If you give up $1 million out of your pool, it becomes harder to be able to get that high dollar top talent and still have enough money to do more than just minimum deals for everybody else. So that's part of it. But if you and then also if you try to sign a second qualifying offer player, what the Giants did after 2023 when they brought on both Blake Snell and Matt Chapman, you lose 2 more picks, your 3rd and 6th highest picks. Not 3rd and 6th round, 3rd and 6th highest picks. But if you didn't pay the CBT, if you reset the CBT and came in under the CBT threshold, you only lose 1 pick. You lose your 2nd highest pick instead of losing your 2nd and your 5th. And you only lose $500,000 from your international bonus pool instead of $1 million. And if you wanted to sign a second player, which I don't think the Braves ever would, you'd also give up your 3rd highest pick then. But instead of 2nd and 5th highest picks and $1 million from your IFA class, it's just your 2nd highest pick and $500,000. So all of a sudden, signing a qualifying offer free agent isn't as expensive as you were expecting, and the penalties aren't as daunting as you thought that they might be. And there are some very, very interesting options in next year's free agency class that should have qualifying offers attached. And we'll discuss those guys next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. Absolutely love playing Underdog Fantasy. Links in the episode description. Promo code BRAVES. When you sign up, you get a free play. And once you make your first deposit, up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Really easy to make this work. You go look at their statistical projections and create a lineup. You choose over or under on whatever stat you want for that player. Maybe it's NBA, maybe it's NFL. I love doing these when baseball gets here because I feel like I'm a smart dude and I can find some good values. Depending on if you pick over or under and how many players are in your lineup, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. And the good news is, Underdog is available just about everywhere in Braves country with the exception of Mississippi. We hate it for you guys. And I've heard recently from fans of both the show and the team from as far away as California, New York State, the Midwest, and you can play all of those places as well. So, links in the episode description for Underdog Fantasy. Promo code BRAVES to get a free play and up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby talking about a hypothetical situation behind resetting the CBT and what that can get you in 2026. And there's a lot of very good players becoming available in 2026. The biggest thing to me, this feels like one of the better pitching classes we've seen in a while as of now, right? A year out. You have some very impressive pitchers of just about every age and success. I mean, Dylan Cease, Zach Gallen, Framber Valdez, Michael King, who looked fantastic for the Padres down the stretch last year. Some guys who have options or opt-outs, Kodai Senga, Shota Imanaga. Guys who could slot into the middle of your rotation, Zach Eflin. Walker Buehler signed a one-year deal with Boston. Nick Martinez got a qualifying offer this year and took it with Cincinnati. There's just a ton of really impressive pitchers. And so depending on how your young players, which of your young pitchers can solidify a rotation spot this year, you may need to go out and reinforce the rotation. And you can get anybody from an ace to a mid-rotation guy to an innings eater. A ton of options there. Relief, same thing. Raisel Iglesias is a free agent. Well, guess what? As of now, Devin Williams could be on the market, traded to the Yankees. Ryan Helsley will be a free agent. Edwin Diaz could opt out of his Mets deal. You could grab him. Robert Suarez of the Padres, who we're going to talk about in tomorrow's show. He could be available. Michael Kopech, traded to the Dodgers. He could be available. There's a lot of pitching as of now in next year's free agent class. But I think the big thing to look at here, one of the reasons why resetting the CBT in 2025 could pay off, is it gives you the opportunity to maybe upgrade at shortstop for 2026. Every position on the Braves roster, as of right now, is locked up for at least 3 seasons, except for shortstop, right? Jurickson Profar signed a 3-year deal in left. Michael Harris is long-term. Ronald Acuna Jr.'s got at least 3 years left. Ozzy Albies has this year in 2 club options. Olson's long-term. Murphy's long-term. Riley's long-term. Shortstop is not. And last season, shortstop was a problem. Now, we've heard Alex Anthopoulos talk about this. If Orlando Arcia is batting 9th, I don't think we care that much. But when he's batting 5th because of injuries, you have a problem. Well, guess what? If you decide that, if the Braves decide that they can't take any more Orlando Arcia, he has a club option for 2026, $2 million. I expect them to pick that up because either way, $2 million is nothing to pay for a good utility guy who can play. He's played outfield before. He's played second. He's played short. He can play third if Riley got hurt, whatever. But you know who's probably one of the top position players available in this class after Vlad Guerrero and Kyle Tucker? Bo Bichette of the Toronto Blue Jays. And there's a lot to like about Bo Bichette, to the point where people have asked if Atlanta was going to trade for him this offseason. And I think, no, they're comfortable rolling with Orlando Arcia in the number 9 hole, knowing that you just signed Jurickson Profar and he could be your 6th best hitter this upcoming year, right? That's how good Jurickson Profar is, but how good your lineup is. But next year, you've got to figure out something. It's kind of all based on what Nacho Alvarez does. We'll talk about that in the next segment. But in the meantime, Bo Bichette, career .290 hitter 93 homers, 56 stolen bases. Now, last year, he played in exactly half a season, 81 games. He had like 4 or 5 different injury issues between a neck, some calf issues, a forearm issue, a broken finger that put him out for the rest of the year. And his stats, because of all the injuries, his stats were atrocious. 225 batting average, 277 on base, 322 slug. His career averages, counting last year, 290 average, 332 on base, 466 slug. To expand on that, he's only had 2 seasons where he, not counting last year, where he hit below 300. In 2020, half the season, he batted 301, short sample. 2021, hit 298. 2022, hit 290. 2023, he hit 306. And in his 46-game debut in 2019, he hit 311. Last year was the only season where he's been a below-average hitter. His OPS plus by year, 19 and 20 were both short samples, 144 and 127. But after that, 121, 128, 122. Remarkably consistent until he dealt with the injuries last year. MVP finisher, all-star in 2 of those years. Been playing almost exclusively shortstop. He DH'd a little bit. He's never taken, as I can find, a single defensive play at any other position other than shortstop and DH. And there's pros and cons to trying to sign Bo Bichette in free agency. I think the first one is, the pro here, he is by far better than what you have, right? I mean, there's zero argument that he is worse than Orlando Arcia. The flip side of that is, there could be other teams who also need a shortstop. It is the hardest position in baseball to fill. I want the Braves to draft a couple shortstops in the next couple drafts, simply because they have not invested at the position, and you're seeing the effects of that right now, because outside of that half of a season, that half of an all-star year by Arcia, they've struggled to replace or to find a shortstop ever since Dansby Swanson left. So there's going to be competition for him, and yes, he's good enough where he's going to get a qualifying offer. Unless he gets traded mid-season. If Toronto trades him during the 2025 season, he's ineligible for a qualifying offer. And I think that's the dream scenario for Atlanta. Because then you can sign him, and it'll just cost you money in years. You're going to have to go over that $22 million artificial threshold. Just live with it, understand it. But you have the ability to get him, if he gets traded during the season, you can get him without giving up a draft pick. He's a great hitter when he's healthy. Again, OPS plus of 120 something every year but last year. The flip side of this is he's not a great defender. The only time that StatCast says that Bo Bichette has been over 0, or even probably even not negative, so 0 or plus, was 2020, where he played 29 games, and 24, where he played 81 games. Now, 81 is a large enough sample size where the fact that he not only, because outs above average is a rate stat, right? The more you play, the more you can accrue. But the fact that he was able to be positive despite over half of a season makes me think maybe he figured something out, but the offense was so bad where it's kind of hard to bank on. I would rather him hit and be below average defensively than have him come over here on a big free agent contract and hit 225 again, but be a +1 OAA for a season. I think a pro on this, though, if you sign him, is he'll be 27 years old. He's only, this year is his age 27 season. His birthday is in March, so he turns 27 when the season starts. He would turn 28 in his first season with you. So even if you have to give him a 5 or 6 year deal, which is longer than the Braves like to go for outside free agents, but even if you have to give him a 5 or 6 year deal, you're still just getting into his lower 30s. So there's ways to mitigate that. We'll talk about that in the next segment. The downside is, despite only being 26 years old, he still had plenty of injuries. He's had 6 IL stints since 2020, although he did play 2 full seasons without any IL stints, and he had 3 last year. Most of his injuries, with the exception of that broken finger, seem to be concentrated in his lower half. I've seen knee, I've seen upper leg, I've seen lower leg. So you have to kind of worry about any continued injuries like that can impact his ability to play shortstop as far as have the range that you need. He did grade out negatively on range. He's also another guy, he hits the ball hard, all of that stuff, but he chases too much. He doesn't walk a ton. You've got a lot of those profiles on the roster already, so that's a little bit frustrating. He doesn't strike out a ton, 19.1% last year. Even in a bad season for statistical production for him, he didn't have a ton of strikeouts. So there's pros and cons on Bo Bichette. And you can maybe mitigate the downsides of Bo Bichette if Nacho Alvarez has a good year this year. And I'll explain that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today, final segment of the Tuesday show where we're talking about some of the potential moves you could make if you're able to reset the CBT this winter. This is all kind of speculation. There's no inside info that the Braves are going after Bichette or have any plans to do this offseason. This is just another aspect. I really wanted to focus on how the qualifying offer stuff works and how there's more to resetting the CBT than just saving $6 million in taxes, right? There's other things that can help. And this is one of those situations. Again, you have every position on the diamond locked up as of right now for at least 3 seasons, except for shortstop. Orlando Arcia has a 1-year club option for 2026. I think it's like still $2 million, and then he's gone, right? You have to either give him a free agent contract into his 30s or he leaves. And so you could bring in Bo Bichette, and some of the downsides of this deal, right? Any further injuries hampering his lower half enough where he has to move over to second, anything like that. You can mitigate some of that with your existing farm system, but I think a lot of it depends on Nacho Alvarez. And there's 2 real issues with Nacho Alvarez that you have to figure out. One of them is offensive, and one of them is defensive. And I'm not going to mention his struggles at the major league level last year. Very small sample. He clearly was not ready. The Braves didn't have a lot of other options. They had to call him up and do that to fill in for some injuries for a little while. And so the offensive issue I want to mention is when you watched in Gwinnett last year, he seemed to struggle with fastballs. He's very good at making contact overall. He hit for more power than we were expecting. It's still below average. Obviously, he had no home runs in Mississippi. Terrible offensive environment to hit home runs, but still, the fact that he had none was a little weird. He hit for more power in Gwinnett, but he didn't do that well with fastballs. He also, at the major league level, wasn't hitting major league fastballs that well. Gwinnett, he was okay at times, but he's got to get better at hitting fastballs. That is probably a prerequisite for any hitter, is you have to be able to catch up on a fastball. So that is something there to watch for offensively. But the bigger issue for Nacho Alvarez, because it's a good profile. He makes contact in the zone last year, almost a 90% rate in AAA. He walked almost 13% of the time, and he struck out just like 16% of the time. Okay. Yes, the ground balls were a little high, like 46% or whatever, but it's a good offensive profile that can be added at the major league level if he's okay with fastballs. But the bigger issue, and I've talked about this before, is his defense. Nacho Alvarez this season, whether it's in Gwinnett or if something happens and it's in Atlanta, to give you the maximum flexibility, he has to show he can play shortstop from a range perspective. And I think his arm is good enough. But from a range perspective, he has to show he can play shortstop. Because if he does, then you have a lot of options next offseason, and you don't have to sign Bo Bichette to do it. If Nacho Alvarez can play shortstop in 2026 at the major league level, can at least be average defensively. He's one of the best pure hitters in the system, and it gives you the flexibility to redirect some of that money you're freeing up. Raisel Iglesias is $16 million. Marcell Ozuna is $16 million. Some of that money that's going to these veterans, one, you probably have to find a closer. There's plenty of options out there. But you can add a guy to your rotation, right? You can go for whatever you want to do. You can go for a top-of-the-market, ace-level guy in Dylan Cease. He's a local kid. Like, he's from the area. He's expressed before he wanted to play for the Braves. I don't know if it's a trade tactic or not. But you can get him and pair him and Strider's mustaches together at the top of rotation for the next 5 years. He posts. He does just about everything you want. It reminds me a lot of AA trying to sign Aaron Nola last offseason. A lot of the same characteristics as far as reliable, above average performance. I think the ceiling's higher for Cease than it is for Nola. You can go do that. Maybe it's a Zach Gallen or a Framber Valdez. Again, there's tons of options in free agency next year. I'd love them to get Michael King on a long-term deal, right? So if Nacho Alvarez can play shortstop, you either cannot sign Bichette, use that money for a pitcher, and you have Nacho at shortstop, and Ozzy next season, 26, is the first of 2 club option years for Ozzy. You have Nacho and Ozzy with RC as a primary backup. Or if you do sign Bichette, you can start off with one at short and one at second. Bichette can start off at shortstop, and you can swap him if you need to. If Bichette deteriorates defensively to the point where he can't hang at shortstop anymore, you can put Nacho Alvarez there, and you can put Bichette at second. When Ozzy is either done with the club options, maybe you re-sign him and he's a second baseman / DH. Because again, Ozzy's defense isn't the best in the world. His arm's one of the weakest in all of baseball, not just at second base. Counting a lot, it's worse than a lot of first baseman arms too. If Nacho Alvarez can't play second base, that's where you get in a little bit of trouble. Because either one, you have to address shortstop with Bo Bichette. There's not a lot of other options for shortstop outside of that, right? Trevor Story has an opt-out. He is, I think, worse at shortstop than Bo Bichette. I think Trevor Story's cooked. Orlando Arcia, you have one more year of him. The other free agent options, Jorge Mateo lost his job in Baltimore. He's coming off Tommy John. He had Tommy John surgery on his throwing arm. Usually when position players have TJ, they have to move to less demanding defensive positions. He's probably a second baseman when he comes back. Miguel Rojas is super old. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, I don't think is an everyday player anymore. Ahmed Rosario's never been good defensively like anywhere he's played. Or, like, again, you have to keep RC around and hope you can get John Gill, Jose Perdomo, get one of them to the majors in 2 or 3 years. And then you have the issue of you have this good hitter in Nacho that you can't play at short. You have to play him at second, but you have Ozzy at second. Do you end up DHing Ozzy more than you play him at second? How do you work that out? It causes problems. So if the Braves reset the CBT in 2025, which again, not a given, they don't have to do it. But if they do, it makes the non-financial penalties much less severe next offseason. If they want to go out, sign a stud pitcher. If they want to go out, sign a stud closer. If they want to go out, sign Bo Bichette. It gives the Braves a lot more flexibility because you're losing 1 draft pick versus 2, and you're only losing $500,000 from your international bonus pool versus losing a full $1 million. And for context, Braves had like $6 million this year to spend, so you take away 1/6 of the pool. Let me know what you think. Do you think that the Atlanta Braves, if they reset the CBT, should sign a shortstop or should go out and get one of these starters like a Dylan Cease or a Zach Gallen? Speaking of, we'll have a show tomorrow about Dylan Cease, maybe and Robert Suarez in a package deal from the Padres together if we look at upgrading starting pitcher via trade between now and opening day. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you're listening on audio. Do us a favor, leave a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop the next episode, and send all your friends to bravestoday.com to subscribe, again, either free or paid, to the Braves Today newsletter. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.